My name's Sean Ginevan. I work on the Android Enterprise business team at Google. Our team is responsible for the business-to-business success of the Android platform. We're a dedicated team of engineers, product managers, go-to-market folks like myself, who are ultimately trying to make sure that Android is a great platform for your employees and for business transformation projects that your company may want to do. And what I wanted to do is give a little bit of a history of some of the work we've been doing on the Android platform, but more importantly, introduce some marketing, go-to-market initiatives that we've launched here at Google to hopefully make understanding how to adopt Android into your organization easier, so you can focus on real things like what you want to do inside of your business. From an employee enterprise enablement perspective, we've done a ton of technical investment in Android, going all the way back to the days of Android Lollipop. In Android 5, we introduced this concept of Android for Work and two core features. One, which was the idea of the work profile, which helped organizations who wanted to support BYOD allow end users to bring their own devices in a way that would be secure, such that basically data applications that you deploy to that end user wouldn't interact with personal information that the user may have. And more importantly, that was designed to protect user privacy. We wanted to make sure that IT wasn't snooping on the file system, the photos, the music, anything else the user may have brought with them. We also, in parallel, introduced features for fully managed devices. This was the idea that if you're kind of thinking about things in the old BlackBerry world, the idea that I can lock down the device, the idea that I can whitelist the applications that go on that device and have a relatively full degree of control over the hardware. In every version since Android 5, we've done more technical investment into the Android platform. We introduced better support for what we call corporate-owned single-use or dedicated devices. These are the barcode scanners you see at places like Walmart, offering higher degree of control to make sure that that device is used only for barcode scanning and not, say, watching YouTube on the job. We introduced better support for things like certificates, and carrying on to Nougat, we introduced improved usability controls like the work profile challenge, so that way if I go through and allow my nephew to go and play with my device, and I turn off the work profile so that way my nephew doesn't play with my email account, not that that would ever happen, there's challenge with the passcode before those applications can be accessed. We've introduced features most recently in Oreo called Zero Touch. This allows an enterprise to make sure that as you unbox the device, that device automatically gets enrolled in for management, automatically gets provisioned with corporate applications, really elevating the experience and activation process that an end user needs to go through. And now with Android Pie, we've really focused on a lot of those frontline workers that we've talked about here at Cloud Next, improving things like shared device use cases, improving things like support for multiple users, and improving a lot of the UX around the work profile, making it easier to find the applications that IT has provisioned out to you. To sort of up-level a lot of what this looks like, if you haven't adopted Android Enterprise, actually quick show of hands, how many folks are actually running Android inside of your organization? Okay, I think I can almost see through the spotlights and the projector. How many of you are running Android Enterprise? Okay, only a couple of you. We'll talk about why that's important in a minute, but when you look at the Android platform and what you're able to do with it, it really allows you a high degree of flexibility when you start to go and do things that are more than just email. Frankly, even if you are just doing just email, the personally owned world allows it makes it such that IT has very limited control over what you can do with that device. You can only view and manage the work applications. You have very little control over the device. You can provision Wi-Fi, that's about it. VPN, that's about it. And there's a high degree of separation between work and personal. At a technical level, what we're actually doing is creating a separate user space on that device in the work profile world. It means that it's almost like having two instances of Android running on the same device. File systems are handled separately, processes are isolated, memory is isolated, even cryptographically the data can be stored different. And so it makes sure that there's a high degree of separation between work and personal. I can't just click open in and share random data out to Facebook. On the company's own side of things, you can enforce full control over that device. As I mentioned earlier, that could be as simple as whitelisting what goes on that device. It could be as complex as creating a full launcher such that really it almost feels like the ticket kiosks you might see here at the AMC Theater. I only see those particular workflows. I don't see anything else on that device. And you can optionally, on those fully managed devices, if you're using corporate liable as your mechanism of ownership, so you own the device, you want to have a high degree of control. Most recently with Android 8, we allow you to deploy a work profile on those fully managed devices. And what that means is you still have that high degree of control over the assets you own, but the end user can go and bring their own apps to work, and there's still that high degree of data separation between the two. So a ton of flexibility. Virtually every use case that we have encountered over the years has been now tackled inside of the Android Enterprise framework. We've also done a ton of investment into security. We believe that ultimately Android has to have a high degree of security, and that starts with the operating system. We really have a lot of security tools baked in. Things like encryption, things like secure boot, so we actually validate that the operating system has booted properly. We're doing things that integrate the operating system into the hardware. So when you call cryptographic functions in Android, those keys get stored in a dedicated secure element on that device. And we also are dedicating the secure boot process out to that secure element. So there's a high degree of assurance that that device hasn't been tampered with before it interacts with any of the corporate data that you might decide to put on it. We have a lot of management APIs that allow you to easily customize and tailor and provision that device experience. And we hook all of this up to Google Play Protect. So Google Play Protect, how many folks are familiar with Google Play Protect? A few people. For the rest of you that aren't familiar with it, Google Play Protect is actually what we're doing here at Google to tackle malware on Android, as well as on Android VMs in Chrome. What we do is we scan every application that is in Google Play. We are actually using our web search technologies to go and look out to the broader web and find applications that are hosted outside of Google Play, and we scan those as well. We can optionally, if the user is opted into this, look at the device itself, pull applications off of it that may have been sideloaded, and validate those as well. And what that means is every day we're scanning, give or take, 50 billion different applications to flag for what those applications are and whether they can be potentially harmful. There's always work to do on this, but since we launched this program, it is less likely that you will die in your bathtub than find malware in Google Play. It used to be that you were less likely, continuing with the morbidity thread, that you'd be less likely to get hit by lightning. But we've since actually broadened our definition of malware. We're hunting for more things here at Google, and in order to create a safe environment for end users. And as we go and look for more broader sets of things that are potentially harmful, obviously we're cracking down as well. A lot of the data that we look at from a security perspective is also exposed out to you as developers. There's an entire suite inside Android called SafetyNet, and that allows you to query for things like, did the device boot properly? Has Google Play Protect found malware on this device? Are my cryptographic keys still not been tampered with? And so you can actually have a high degree of certainty, certainly through your management APIs, but also you as developers can actually query for that data to make sure that the device is in a secure state before any data is handled. Now, I like to think from a Google perspective, we're doing quite well, but it's always better to have validation from third parties. Gartner has gone through and done a recent analysis of various mobile operating systems that are in the market, Android and others. And what the key thing to look at in this chart are Android 8 and Android on Pixel, which is sort of a very pure version of Android. And the key thing also to know in this chart is that dark blue is better. And so in the Gartner's own analysis, and there's a whole video up on YouTube that will walks through how this analysis was done, talks to Dave Kleidemarker, our VP of Security. But the point here is that Gartner in this objective analysis found that Android has a higher degree of security and deeper level of feature integration from a security perspective than other platforms in the market. So with the security issue sort of tackled, or certainly an ongoing thing that we've tackled, one question we wanted to look at Mobile World Congress 2 years ago was how do we make it easier for you all to procure devices and, more importantly, get those devices under management. We know that at the end of the day, business transformation happens through apps, and we want to make sure that these app devices can be easily unboxed and very easily be enrolled into whatever mobility management tool set you're using, so you can leverage tools like Manage Google Play. And in the last year, we've seen over 50 different resellers join the Zero Touch program. These are resellers that can actually sell you a device and actually activate it through Zero Touch. 30 of those joined in just second half of 2018 alone. So this is a program that we continue to expand, and we want to make sure that we're working with the leading resellers that you all rely on to make sure that you have this great experience from the Android platform. So with all the things that we're doing on the platform side of things, and with all the things we're doing around Zero Touch, the question we get from customers is, how do I know it's enterprise ready? I mentioned to you that back in Android 5 is when we started our technological investment on Android. But in Android 6 is where we made it mandatory. We actually mandated that developers and OEMs who were building Android devices, they had to adopt the Android Enterprise Framework as a part of what we call the CDD, the Compatibility Definition Document. And what that basically means is devices will come with Android Enterprise as a part of that framework. In fact, you can go through and buy a $50 Android Go device in India unlocked, and it will be enrollable into a mobility management system like Google Cloud Identity Manager. Do I think that that $50 Android Go device is what you should be deploying to all of your employees? Probably not. There's a lot of trade-offs with Android Go, including around things like horsepower and memory, to get to that $50 price point. In fact, the Android team has built an entire suite of Go apps that are optimized for these really low bandwidth, low memory environments. And the likelihood that your enterprise apps, like SAP and like Salesforce, will run as well as you would expect is probably pretty low. So with so much availability on the Android platform being out there, we really wanted to answer this question and help our customers answer this question, which is, what can I buy in the market that is going to be enterprise class, not just enterprise ready? And so when we thought about this from a technical perspective, we really and working with our customers, we identified 3 core areas that they brought up to us. One was confidence in selection. So what they were asking us was, if I buy a device, and I'm particularly a multinational organization, any multinationals here? A few of you? So are those devices going to be available on a worldwide basis? Can I buy them unlocked and allow my employee in London, my employee in New York, and my employee in Singapore to get that device and have that device run inside of my organization? The second is consistency in deployment. What we wanted to make sure was that end users, when they enroll their devices to get access to corporate data and get access to applications, we're having a consistent experience. Now, this is not saying that we want to prevent the OEMs from, innovating on top of UX. We don't want the Huawei's of the world, as an example, to stop using their UI frameworks. What we do want to do is make sure that the enrollment workflows and the settings workflows to get connected into your enterprise were largely consistent. And that's what we've been working on with our OEM partners. And finally, we wanted to make sure that devices were current and up to date. We wanted to make sure that when you buy a device, that these devices were going to get patches at least once every 90 days, and that they would be getting those patches for a minimum time period, and that those devices would get at least one dessert upgrade. What we call a dessert upgrade here at Google is a major feature update of Android, and what that means is going from, as an example, Android 8 Oreo to Android 9 Pie. The desserts are in the names. And so those were the really 3 criteria that we saw from customers. We then went to the over 200 OEMs that we worked with, and we asked them who would like to join this program. Who is going to sign up to this elevated set of criteria, and who is going to go and also commit, frankly, to things like training, making sure that they understand Android and they can position it well to their customers. And since then, we've had 12 OEMs bring over 60 different devices to market that are part of the Android Enterprise Recommended portfolio. These devices, a lot of the ones I decided to throw up here on the slide are flagship devices, just because those are the shiniest ones that are out there. But it also represents a lot of different price points. You can now go and work with the likes of Nokia, Huawei, and LG and find devices that are at that $150 to $300 price point, so you can support things like corporate liable deployments of Android. So this is not just a program targeted at $700 and up from a flagship perspective. It really is every price point along that graph. And so we're seeing a lot of success. I'll talk about that in a minute, of just customers trying to really think about this program and using it as a way to help them procure devices more easily. But we got a bit of a poke, which was, that's great for knowledge workers, but what if I'm a Walmart? What if I'm using Android across my entire organization, from the logistics warehouse all the way out to the storefront? Those devices, as great as the Google Pixel 3 is, I've seen videos. We actually did a really cool case study with Walmart and material design, looking at how those devices are used in the warehouse. The Pixel 3 is probably not going to go and hold up to the abuse that a guy who's trying to stack pallets at Walmart is going to go and put on it. And so the good news is that Android's a very open platform. We work with a lot of different OEMs to build really unique devices that are really built to suit for a lot of different use cases. And one of those use cases is the ruggedized market. IDC has in a few different research publications highlighted that Android is the next logical choice for the rugged market, as Microsoft has end-of-lifed the Windows CE platform. And we're really excited to be working with leading OEMs like Zebra, like Honeywell, like Panasonic and Sonim, Point Mobile, Data Logic, Moto, and Motorola Solutions, and Bluebird. This really represents the many of the purpose-built OEMs and ruggedized OEMs in the market. And when we built the criteria for Enterprise Recommended for Rugged, we knew that was going to be different than what we should be thinking about for knowledge workers. We wanted to make sure that Enterprise Recommended was tackling things like drop testing, tackling things like dust intrusion and water intrusion. In fact, if you go down to the show floor later today or tomorrow, we have many of these devices up in the Android Enterprise Recommended area in the Workplace Transformation Pavilion. So you can get a feel for what those devices look like. So what's important to note here is that this is not just us going to the market and saying, hey, sign up and we'll slap a badge on. We're actually validating that these devices are meeting these criteria. We're looking at those workflows for enrollment and making sure that those devices are doing the things that are part of the Enterprise Recommended criteria. We're going through and looking at how these devices act when they're under enterprise management. We're not drop testing devices. That is an area where we look to the partners to show us validation around things like IP ratings and the like. But we are actually independently looking at these devices to ensure they're meeting our criteria. And so far, we've seen a lot of really positive reaction from the market. Data from HMD Global, which are the manufacturer of Nokia devices, has found that many, and over 56% of folks are aware of the Enterprise Recommended program, but more importantly, they're really looking to the program to make purchasing decisions. And data from a recent survey from in Europe from IDC said that I think as a result of a lot of the security investment we've been putting into Android, they believe that those devices that have been validated by Google and that are using the latest and greatest from Android can be more secure than iOS. And we're seeing a variety of different organizations really look toward Enterprise Recommended as their way of supporting the Android platform inside of their IT organization. HSBC is one of those, and HSBC has come out publicly and stated that they will only look toward Enterprise Recommended devices as they send out requests for proposals for corporate liable, as they think about their BYOD catalog inside the bank. The notable point also is that Android's really being proven across those most sensitive verticals, places like financial services and government and healthcare and the like. SAP is another partner that has actually come out very publicly and said that Enterprise Recommended was a key initiative for them, and specifically for BYOD. A lot of people think about BYOD as bring your own device, and I know I'm not, the recording, I'm widening my arms as wide as I can. But the idea here is that, the challenge with that is, can IT assure that these devices are going to actually be secure and be handling corporate data properly? And so many organizations like SAP and like HSBC, when they start their BYOD programs, they really say, here are the catalog of devices we will allow into our organization. BYOD doesn't mean bring your own everything. It means if you want to support Android, here are the Android devices we're willing to let in. If we want to support other platforms, here's the catalog that you can choose from. And we really see a lot of success from our customers when they use that method to launch their BYOD initiatives inside of their company. So I mentioned it's really around these three criteria, but as we've rolled out the hardware program early last year, or so I guess almost 2 years ago now, we heard from our customers that these were really good initiatives to helping us figure out hardware, but hardware is not the be-all, end-all of a mobility deployment. There's a lot of cases where there's additional services, additional support, additional software that I might want to roll out into my organization. How do I know that those are going to be meeting a similar set of criteria and will be successful inside of my mobility deployment? And so this year we launched Android Enterprise Recommended Services. It was really in response to what we were hearing from customers around validating the broader set of ecosystem that Android supports beyond just hardware. And we focused on two core areas. One is enterprise mobility management, so the suite of services that are managing devices inside of your organization, as well as managed service providers. So this is the actual partners, the technical partners who may be offering deployment and support services to assist your IT departments. The EMM requirements really focused on these four key areas on the slide, but one was making sure that EMMs were stepping up to the variety of different ways that Android can be deployed. When an EMM partner works with Google, we actually do validate the solution sets, whether it's fully managed, work profile, corporate, dedicated. We validate that those particular software implementations, whether they're in Enterprise Recommended or not, correspond to the technical specs that we author. But what we were finding is that not every EMM offered every deployment style. At the same time, IT was trying to go through and use Android in a variety of different deployment scenarios. I mentioned Walmart as an example. You can imagine how you deploy a device at Walmart or at Marks & Spencer on the shop floor, on the store floor, is very different than how you might deploy Android inside the accounting department or the other parts of the corporate enterprise inside of those organizations. And so we really wanted to validate that advanced feature sets from at least two of the different deployment mechanisms of Android Enterprise, two of the three, were supported. We wanted to make sure also that these partners were offering dedicated technical leadership. I actually came from MobileIron before I joined Google. In many cases, EMMs act as the front line of support for many mobility deployments because it's the sort of the glue that's holding things together and actually activating the deployment of devices inside of corporate IT. And so we wanted to make sure that these organizations did two things. One was that in managing Android, Android Enterprise would be the default and primary mode of management that these pieces of software would be using inside of deployments. And two, that there was guidance and documentation for customers that were either rolling out or migrating to Android Enterprise. We really wanted to make sure that best practices from Google were well established, not just from ourselves, but from these technical partners that are going out and helping customers deploy Android inside of their enterprise. We wanted to make sure that they were offering enterprise level support. So we were actually been doing a lot of training from Google of these partners to make sure that if you call a given EMM, they understand, at least their escalation teams will understand the Android platform. They can troubleshoot how Android's deployed inside of an organization. And finally, we really wanted to make sure there was a proven ability to deploy, that these particular partners had worked with large IT organizations, had demonstrable success with these IT organizations, and frankly made sure that their field organizations, their sales and technical sales specialists were well trained by Google about Android Enterprise so that the relevant technical knowledge was being conveyed to the customer. We're really excited by this traction we're getting in the early days of Enterprise Recommended. We've had so far 9 partners join this program. Many of these are the ones that are in the top right of various market surveys, whether they be from Forrester, Gartner, or IDC. We really are pleased with the level of technical leadership that they're bringing to the technical leadership that they're bringing to the table in support of your enterprise mobility deployments. The second area was around managed service providers. There's a lot of organizations, particularly if you look in the desktop world, that have decided to outsource frontline support or outsource the deployment services for platforms like Windows, Mac, and even Chromebook. And so we wanted to make sure as organizations start to look toward their mobility deployments being handled in the same way, that managed services providers were really, really well trained and offered a high degree of technical depth in supporting your deployments. So again, it really falls in these 3 core areas of competence and selection, that these folks are validated and trained by Google, that they have proven expertise, that they have consistent training and standardized on escalation processes from Google, and that they're always current on the latest training requirements, and frankly, that they routinely collaborate with us on business objectives. Android is obviously an ever-evolving platform, and so we want to make sure that our partners, both the EMMs as well as the MSPs, are continually keeping up to date in the services that they're bringing to the market. From a deeper dive into where that platform looks like, we mandate that 80% of the sales and technical sales specialists are trained in what we call Android Academy. So Android Academy is a program we launched about 18 months ago, designed to make sure that the best practices and knowledge of Google is out there in the market. For those of you that are curious, it's up at androidenterprise.training. And that is designed to target toward 2 core areas. One is sales specialists, that you understand how to do basic positioning of the Android platform. You understand how that Android is secure and that it can be used to do really cool things around business transformation. And then it dives into a higher degree of technical depth for technical sales specialists. So not just that Android is secure, but that Android actually, how Android offers that security, how that security is integrated to the hardware, so you can position that data to your customer. We've since expanded that program through an invite-only program called the Android Enterprise Experts Program. And that really takes a much deeper set of validation to the individual. We're actually going through, and we'll show you in a minute, I'll just show you now. We actually are taking folks into the lab, and we're making sure they know how to troubleshoot something if something goes wrong. We introduce failure scenarios that we've seen from actual deployments, and make sure that the support and deployment engineers know how to troubleshoot through these particular processes. And these MSP trainings were run by Google. These were our partner and customer engineering teams from Mountain View, New York, and London that traveled around the world to train all of these individuals. And so when we launched the program, mandated that the partners have at least 2 Android Enterprise experts and 2 Android support engineers in each region that they serve. We also mandated that these folks be trained on EMMs, and that they actually be trained, and I believe at least 2 EMMs. And finally, that they have demonstrative technical ability through customer deployments in deploying Android Enterprise. Since we launched the program, we've had a variety of some of the leading organizations in enterprise mobility services step up to the plate and join this program. Leading brands like Accenture and Cognizant and DXC and Econocom and Honeywell have ponied up the technical resources needed to ensure that they are offering great services to the market. And I've been in mobility for quite some time. I've very rarely seen engineers get nervous in training programs, but the Android Experts program was one of those where folks were definitely put to the test, and we're super excited to have these partners joining us. So, when we look at this from a holistic level, we've really been investing on a program-by-program basis to make sure that all of the different partners that you work with are well served by the best knowledge from Google, the best validation of the services that these folks provide, that the software we provide is being incorporated into these product suites, and that this evolves over time. With every release of Android, we're continuing to evolve the technical requirements for devices, the training requirements for EMMs and MSPs, so this will be an evolving program where you'll see hopefully new partners join the program, but certainly also there's an assurance that these partners are validated as new versions of Android come out. I'll leave you with this. I asked at the beginning of this presentation how many folks were running Android, and lots of different hands went up. And then I asked how many of you were running Android Enterprise, and not as many hands went up, only a few. For those of you that are running Android inside of your organization, many of you may have been using legacy software to do it. There was a suite of tools that we offered prior to Android 5 called Device Administrator. It offered basic client-side APIs to set a device passcode, to turn off hardware like Bluetooth or the camera. And these were really basic tools, almost like the very basic suite of policies that came with ActiveSync in the early days of Windows Mobile. We've since deprecated a lot of those client-side APIs. In Android 9, we actually deprecated passcode and device hardware controls in documentation. So if you call those APIs on Android 9, you'll get an error saying, this isn't supported anymore. In Android 10, we're actually going to turn those APIs off. So if your organization is looking to actually support Android Enterprise, or support Android from an IT management perspective, it's really important that you be looking to the Android Enterprise framework to actually roll this out in your organization. Up on our blog at blog.google, in the Android Enterprise product updates section, we have an entire, there's a blog post and a blue book that we've launched to help you understand how to tackle that migration, to take a cap and grow strategy to your Android deployment to make sure that the latest devices enrolling can actually work in the Android Enterprise framework. And certainly from our perspective, we're making sure that our our mobility management partners and our services partners are well trained to help you through that journey.